Marina, thank you for being on the show. I have a lot of questions as we're preparing. So many different areas we want to talk about. I want to talk about maybe a first area to explore is before your career. So, from what I understood, you told me that at the age of 16, you went to be a volunteer paramedic. So maybe walk us through and explain the rationale as to why you chose to do that at such a young age.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me today, first of all. And being a paramedic actually came from the fact that I was passionate about medicine and I was passionate about science at a very young age. Because of my age, of course, I was not able to get into medical school at 15 years old, although I would have loved to do that. And so I got into the paramedic field with my dad. We took a CPR course and then decided to stay with the Red Cross a bit longer, and I've always been a bit adventurous, I want to say. I had the opportunity to join with the Red Cross, a camp of refugees that were escaping the war in Kosovo, and to join to help them adapt through a lot of psychological process, of escaping that and adapting into doing your life and etc. And so I've done that step with them. It requires quite a lot of formation to be part of that, and you have to pass certain level of certification. So those are internal trainings that you get at the Red Cross. But that was a fantastic opportunity, and that really gave me the opportunity to be around this different aspect of emergency medicine and paramedic and etc. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it was like, right? Like, the War of the Balkans and, and Kosovo in particular was obviously a very, very big moment in history. Are there any like life lessons that you took out of this? I imagine it must have been such a formative experience for you. So just curious as to any key takeaways that have stayed with you.
Yeah, I think it really helps you put the priority on what's important and what is not, and to manage these challenges that stays in your life. I think if I had stayed through medical school, I would have probably choose emergency medicine as a major and residency program. But eventually, this also applies in venture capital, where you're pulled through different type of projects that are very different every day and different type of priorities, and you have to be able to manage this. And that really gave me the tools to be efficient in that space.
Yeah, you mentioned it really, it clarifies priorities, right? So it's like nothing like a war zone or a global pandemic, my father, lived through World War II. And now through the current pandemic, it's like, what are we talking about? Like, what's this virus? Like, the Nazis invaded. Like, why are we talking about this, right? So it really puts things into perspective, when your life is challenged. And I think, like you said, it kind of helps you prioritize just things in your life more generally. So, and then, so you decided to like, not pursue medicine, but you did study in biochemistry. So interested to hear a little bit about biochemistry. Why that field was something you were interested in at an early age?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's something that's really important to me, is that I've always had an entrepreneurship spirit, and I always wanted to have my own biotech company when I was younger. And so I always thought that either I'm going to be a doctor or I'm going to be a doctor slash entrepreneur. And that's the way that I thought things would unfold. And I really wanted to have a company that was very related to stem cells and to solve some of the current climate issues that we have and the current issues on the supply chain that we have for on the medical side. So, for example, if you're losing your hair, can you create a hair that's universal that you can actually transplant on everybody, and whether it's male or female baldness, this type of pattern. And those are the type of medicine that I really liked. Or if you're burned, can I actually create skins out of stem cells and then be able to make it universal so that everybody can benefit from it? I was really interested into that field, and so I decided to study biochem when stem cells were not a thing at that time, but I really thought that it had a potential. And then shortly after I graduated from biochem at University of Montreal, stem cells became very a hot topic of interest in research. And I also had a thing for understanding the origin of the genome. And so that's the route that I took later on during my graduate studies at University of Montreal. I've worked there in about a year and a half in the genome research lab, and also took also that course later on for my master's.
Yeah, it's remarkable in terms of like your path. Why not pursue that dream of biotech? What happened along the way? Like obviously we'll talk about venture capital and like how you've found this very interesting path. But curious as to like what happened there to not pursue that specifically.
Yeah, it's a great question, because actually, so I went to study medicine which is closely related to biomedical science, in South Korea. So I went to South Korea at Seoul National University to do my master's. And the reason why I went there is because they have the ability to be a professor in school, lead academic research, but also have a biotech company on the side. And I want to see how are they able to actually be able to raise both, which you would think would actually take two people to have the skill set of being successful in both fields. But South Korea was doing that pretty well at the time, and I decided to go there to study this, and also being part of a top university and top medical research in genomic and stem cells research. Um, and that later on, doing more research on the field, I noticed that if you're on the investment side, you actually have the opportunity to impact a lot of biotech companies and to give a greater impact. Or it's not just one company that's hiring 100 people that's focusing on developing one or a couple of products. It's actually a portfolio of companies that are focusing into solving uh, quite a few issues, whether it's climate tech, whether it's healthcare, or etc. So you definitely have a greater impact as an investor, and you can help them being successful while still being outside of the company, but staying as a investor, providing them capital.
And was that your first kind of like foray into like, hey, maybe investing is interesting? So curious, before Hike, did you experience any other careers in investing, or is Hike your first one?
No, so actually, I started my career in venture capital a little bit earlier than Hike. So shortly after I graduated from Seoul National University, I had brought that skill set um, of having both understanding of life sciences, biochemical, and bioinformatic analysis. And that being said, that brought me to consulting and let me sow a little bit of the pre-commercialization startups and relationship to investors. And later on down the road, I joined the government run fund between Ontario and South Korea. So that was a former role at Ice Ventures, where we were fostering through capital academic research between the two regions, so between Ontario and South Korea, by providing them with capital. And after that, I've also joined BDC Capital and healthcare investments, which was also an interesting step into more institutional VC. So it was not a government rent fund, it was a crown corporation at that time, but we were investing into corporations that were later stage. And I found the later stage quite interesting. So I decided to go back into consulting to help companies progress toward IPO. So really, it was helping these pre-IPO companies that were located not necessarily just in Canada. So we had a client in Hong Kong, in Japan, in South Korea. Those were different type of clients, and we helped them going through the IPO process or going through the M&A process as well. And those are much more later stage. But doing early stage investments, so at the seed stage, the same way that Hike is doing it, it was really my first time joining a seed stage investors, a team of investors, and helping them, support the portfolio grow, and also LP relations for a VC fund that's institutional, if I want to say.
Yeah. What did you like about early stage? I think it's probably the type of investment I'm more familiar with. So curious to hear you as to like what was the aspect of it that gave you made you passionate about it.
It's a great question because early stage is very different than later stage. So later stage company, they really know where they're heading to, and they already have a good sense of the investors that they want to speak with, and that they want to work with. Early stage companies have the ability to scale into a different type of shape, and they have this ability to adapt to different type of market and to develop certain products versus others. And so, they're very flexible in general, and I think they also need quite a lot of help. And I found that the model of Hike Ventures was actually very appealing to me because we partner with a network of corporations in Japan that can uh, that actually give our portfolio sort of the ability to grow to international market through the footprints of those corporations. And so the early stage startups in general, I want to say, um, really have tons of options in front of them. It really depends on which one they want to choose, which investors they want to work with, and which direction they gain. And so they're more flexible also to work with corporations, I found. And so that really is attracting to me because you can really shape them into a successful path, and it could be very different depending on who you're working with. So I found that helping them through their journey from inception to later stage, whether you decide to go the IPO or M&A route, it really is fascinating.
Yeah, I completely agree. I find that's the part that's most interesting about earlier stage is you just have so many more degrees of freedom on the scale to be able to
Yeah,
help that company operate in so many different moves, via partnership, growth, hiring, etc. There's so many different angles that a company could take because it's still in such a raw format versus something, so a company that has hundreds or thousands of employees, they're set in their path, so it's harder to have an impact. Well, you could still have an impact, it's just at a different level, I think. It's hard on a one-on-one basis. Let's say with when you're sitting down with a founder to really have this an important impact with not a lot of effort required, which I think is really the cool part. So maybe walk me through
yeah.
Hike. I wasn't familiar with Hike Ventures before we met, before the exploring and researching a little bit about Hike and the work that you guys do. So love to hear about Hike specifically, and then I have a few more questions, but I'll let you start with that.
Yeah, no problem. So, hi, Ventures. We're kind of the new VC in town in Canada. We haven't been active in Canada for very long. It's been 3 years that we were formed. We started in February 2018. We're early stage investors, and we usually invest in seed stage applied AI. We are headquartered in California, in Silicon Valley, and we have offices in Tokyo. Now, since I joined the team in May this year, we have representation in Canada, in Ontario. We also have investment that are across North America, so US and Canada, Japan, Israel, and the UK. And in a nutshell, the very key point of High Ventures is that we work with a network of Japanese corporations that have the ability to, some of them are LPs, others are not. We help them source POCs within our portfolio of companies, and sometimes we co-invest with them. And we also work with a network of top-tier VC in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like in this interesting intersection of, IP and knowledge from Japan with deal flow opportunity in North America,
Yeah.
and along this intersection of technology, maybe deeper in terms of that technology component. So it looks, having examined a little bit of portfolio, it seems like very focused on machine learning, deep learning.
That's
Any
correct.
any access beyond that, the top level of just employing data science, or is there something that's orthogonal as well, like another intersection?
So that's an excellent question because AI never really stops at AI itself. So we usually, if you look at our portfolio, we've deployed our capital across 29 investments in US, Canada. Um, I think we've made 8 investments in Canada, and they're all different in nature. And that's the same for Japan, Israel, and UK. We usually invest into AI. I think that's a very specific point to understand before I can answer your questions. That we invest into AI that has global application, that is led by a team of domain experts, post-product launch, and the core tech must be AI. But um, that means that you can definitely have AI slash other type of technology, and that's usually the case in our investments. So, for example, AI and robotic, AI on the analytics side, but there's also the data must be coming from somewhere. So that could be computer vision, that could be sensors, that could be a different type of data set. It's usually coupled with other type of tech on the side. And maybe if you want, I can give you a few examples of the investment that we've made that are actually very good example of what we've done so far at High Ventures. So one that I really like to talk about is YPC Technology in Montreal. So that's the latest investment that we've made in Canada. It's a great example of what we've done at High Ventures so far and what we are going to do in the future with our second round. It was a seed stage deal. We co-led the round with Real Ventures, and we also received participation from Toyota AI Ventures in the seed stage, which is kind of unusual for a corporation to be able to fund the company's seed stage. And the company is a robot that prepares recipes from fresh ingredients. So it really is becoming the helper in the kitchen. And YPC developed that technology with computer vision, with AI, so that it can prepare fresh recipes out of fresh ingredients, and that fit in that case really well within the smart city mandate of Toyota. And so we had made other investment in the food industry, but in the UK that focuses more on the quality control of food retail chain. The YPC is more downstream, where it really provides a full solution to help in the kitchen and to make the kitchen more autonomous. And so I think that's a good example, but there are also maybe two examples that I'd like to talk about, if I can take 1 minute for that.
Yes, please.
I can talk about our investments all day long because all the technology are so different in nature and they're so very fascinating. We've also made another investment in this type of technology, so that where you have a mix of robotic, computer vision, AI, analytic to provide a full solution. And one of them is Everest Lab. Everest Lab is located in California. Sorry, where we have a company that is really a mix of computer vision, AI for analytics, robotics, to offer a solution for recycling facilities and help them sort faster and smarter. And so I hope that really gives you a good example of, where do you use AI and how is AI made important here in our current modern society. We really came on early in that stage, on the seed stage of the company, and then we gain they gain quite a lot of traction in California, and they made an outstanding development on their tech to provide the full solution to the recycling facility, where it's not just a robot that picks and that sorts. It's a robot that has a full ability to pick the right object, to differentiate between different type of materials, and then to grab the object, to put it aside, so to recycle. But then it also provides, you have AI on top that also provides full details on the analytic side of the tech. And so that was one of the recent investment that we've made at the seed stage as well. This one was in California. We have one last in Vancouver on the West Coast, British Columbia. It's also an example of how do you apply AI to different type of technology. This one uses a mix of blockchain and AI to find missing royalties in the streaming industry. The company is called BitDAP, and they provide that solution to artists, labels, and distribution platforms to be able to find those missing royalties, and then provide them with whole or sort of of analytic as well.
Yes,
You've heard about it, I think, right?
a little bit, yeah, a little bit.
I think in that case, it really fitted our investment thesis because the founder had the right expertise. Their advisory board is absolutely to die for. It's really impressive, and they have the right team to make great progress in their sales channel. They have global applications. It was a seed round that happened to be oversubscribed, and they have the ability to scale beyond Canada, and they have the right support for that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I love those examples. I'm going to link to them in the show notes, and it really kind of sheds a light, or at least reminds me about how early we are in the deployment of these technologies, right? So it's like you could literally say, take AI, think of anything in the world, and how it'll be made better, essentially, right? I think it was a Google CEO that said it was like akin to man discovering fire, right? So
Yeah.
it's still so early in terms of its deployment. I'd be curious to dive into like HKEX positioning, right, as a firm. So obviously, provide capital early stage in these companies, but there's a lot of companies that do this. Is it the partnership component, the ability to partner with a Toyota, let's say, to be able to accelerate the go-to-market of a company, or do you have other value creation principles that you guys employ, like let's say data science people internally to help your portfolio companies? So curious as to how you think about adding value when on top of just capital.
That's a great question. So Like I was saying earlier, Hike Ventures, we are a transatlantic fund. We operate out of California at the moment for our first fund, our fund one, and we started with a network of corporation in Japan. The way that we work with them, some of them are our LPs. So we have 80% of strategic investors in our fund and 20% are institutionals. But we also have a wider network of corporations in Japan, which we work with so that our portfolio has access to them to either pitch to them to their CVC arm and they can co-invest with us, or to pitch to them for POCs, for general partnership, licensing deals, system integrations, and all sort of solutions so that they have access to that corporation's ability to deploy their tech on a global scale. So in essence, this is the value add that we bring here is that we also have a partner in Japan, in Tokyo, that can definitely help with the market entry side, but also in deploying capital in regions that we don't cover. And we have a partner in San Francisco that's also working with top tier VC to help our company pitch to top tier VC. So that the value add is of Hike Ventures is that we really have the ability to bridge, I want to say, Japan for our first round, um, Silicon Valley, California in general, and Canada. Now, for our second fund, if I can maybe disclose a little bit of a hint of what's going to happen over a second fund, since a couple of months ago, we started adding South Korean companies to our portfolio to give the opportunity of our portfolio company to pitch to renowned names. And so, for example, it would not necessarily be just Japanese corporation; it could also be some well-known telecoms or some well-known automakers in Korea. And we want to be able to help them provide them with a lot of the opportunities, not just in Japan, but also more generally in Southeast Asia, growing through Japanese corporation or through South Korean corporations means that they also have access to a global footprint of this corporation. And so in essence, that would be our value add at Hike Ventures for our second fund that we are going to launch in January 2021.
Yeah, very cool. Well, yeah, I wanted that. I'm going to come back to this interesting, geographic question. So I'm going to park it for now. I'll come back to it. Before we recorded, we were talking about this concept of venture partner, which is relatively new.
Yeah.
So maybe just a simple question is, what exactly is a venture partner?
A venture partner is a role that largely evolved from the inception of the role. I think it was mainly made to bring deal flow to the venture capital or to help on specific topic. And I think it evolved quite recently into different type of roles. So in essence, now a venture partner is somebody that could be either full-time or part-time or more as an advisor. It really depends on the venture capital and the agreement that they have. It's a non-GP, non-associate, non-principal, so it's a non-traditional VC role, but it also defines a person that brings a specific skill set to the team. And that skill set can be used in many ways. So for example, whether it is portfolio support, expertise into a certain type of due diligence. So sometimes people with expertise in quantum tech or techs that would require you to have a PhD and to be able to analyze the tech. It could be on the strategy, partnership side. It also has a deal flow aspect to it that I think is very present nowadays, still within the venture partner role. But in essence, this is what it represents. It's usually a person that brings in a typical skill set.
Yeah, I was gonna say you pick and choose from your skill sets, like saving people's lives, understanding tech. I think you bring a lot to the table. I want to talk about another subject we were talking about before recording, right? This notion of diversity, right? And I think
Yeah.
I've been, as a mea culpa, I've been really bad at getting broader diversity on my podcast, just by virtue of my network. I've been putting in concerted effort, but I'm still very far from hitting my goal. So yeah, how do more women get into VC? I find it's a space that's still very much male dominated. So curious to hear you a little bit about this notion of diversity. How can we promote, more women entering into the space? So just curious to get your thoughts.
It's a good question, and I think that ILPA recently introduced a diversity tool and a spreadsheet to help you evaluate if your team is actually diverse in terms of gender, in terms of ethnical background. And I think that this is getting very interesting to see that now LPs are also thinking about, you know, bringing diversity to the next step for venture capital. And I think that diversity and inclusion is important, not only in gender and background, but also into welcoming newer generations of investors and supporting them into their career. With more women graduating from STEM majors, and more women, you know, coming not necessarily from financial background, but also that have like me, a scientific background, and then they're willing to join venture capital. It's good to encourage them and to encourage this newer generation to come in and work with us and bring their expertise, their point of view, foster their career, making sure that you always double check that, you know, your team is diverse. That also reflects on your portfolio quite a lot. Because if your team is coming from a diverse background, you also want to make sure that your investment also uh, are representing diverse background and gender. And we at High Ventures, it happened quite naturally. It happens that we do back women funder. We also back quite a lot of the funders that are coming from diverse background, and it's something that we keep an eye on. So we keep also track with the help of ILPA and with the help of these tools to assess that that we're backing different type of funders. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an important subject, and I think that one still needs more attention because I think that the
Yeah.
stats are starting to prove it out, right? Like teams that have diversity lead to greater returns. So, like from an LP perspective, that's what they're looking for, right? So, I think there's a direct correlation with this notion of diversity and better fund performance. So, I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the funds, particularly the bigger private equity ones, are really putting a focus on it. But I think it's now starting to trickle down at the earlier stage as well, where because I don't think there's the notion of gender, which of equality, which makes sense, but also just this notion of diversity of thought, right? So having people with different backgrounds, just like yourself, that has had many different life experiences, brings more options to the table for a company, right? So you're able to, again, going back to this notion of like degrees of freedom, you have greater degrees of freedom, so better chances of success as a result of that, right? So that's kind of how I see it. Maybe I'm looking at it with the wrong lens, but I don't know if you have any
Yeah.
reactions to what I just said.
It's no, it's true, and it's a no-brainer that you know, the more diverse the team, it's well known that high-performing funds are also very diverse in nature, and it's something to really keep in mind, is that if you work with you know, people that are coming from different group age, different background, different gender, different everything, they also bring a different perspective to your thought and to your vision, and that helps the VC being more competitive, and also that helps the portfolio having a greater length of support. So in general, it's better for the LPs because they also gain greater capital gain, but it's also greater for the impact that you have downstream. You're showing really your funders the right way to move forward, the right type of impact that you can make, and how do you assess that, and also how do you you know, ask yourself if you're in the right direction or not. So in terms of return, I think the literature is here. It's been proven, and I think that now it's our responsibility to make sure that we keep on that route.
Yeah, no, that's great feedback as well. I want to go back to a point you mentioned before, which really piqued my curiosity, is the notion of geographic diversity, right? Because you get to
Yeah.
see deal flow and innovations across that spans 3, 4 different continents. So is there a rule about innovation? Is it true that it has to be from Silicon Valley, or are we seeing this decentralization of cool startups and cool innovation because of decentralized internet that's creating all different opportunities? So curious as to how you look, and then obviously how you invest with that lens in mind.
That's a great question. So remember that at High Ventures, we work with a network of corporations, and they all have different type of issues. So what we do is that we really sit down with them. We hear about their problem. We hear about the issues that they're facing, the challenges, and how we can help solve that. So that it actually gives us an idea of the market, what type of solutions are needed. And it's very different for each geography, and which corporations, which vertical, which sector, but also in terms of deal flow, we found that the technology that is being developed in Silicon Valley is very different than what we have here in Canada, and is also very different than the quality or the startups that we see in Israel or in Japan. They're all at different stage. They all have something different to bring to the deal flow. And that's why we keep investing into this different geographic region. In Silicon Valley, what we find is that it's very much full stack solution that are breakthrough, that are really meant to disrupt and to change the way that certain supply chains are made, or that the way that certain technology function. In Canada, we tend to solve a specific problem or a specific challenge within the supply chain. So, for example, in the fintech industry, we tend to work on tiny aspects of the fintech AML, for example, or KYC, and bring them solution to be more performant in that. But I found that why certain solutions are maybe more superficial in Silicon Valley, because they bring this full stack solution. What we have here in terms of technology in Canada is very deep dive into one type of problem, and how can we help them solve that. And so in nature, because these deals are very different for each geography, we're able to keep our investments active into different type of verticals and different type of regions.
That's an interesting lens. The first time I hear someone that describe that difference, it makes a lot of sense. In
Yeah.
terms of maybe not specific companies, but along the same lines of like cool use cases or cool technologies that you're keeping an eye on, but that are
Yeah.
not necessarily mainstream yet. So maybe still below, below the radar, that haven't gained popularity. So curious to learn from you on this.
Yeah, there are a lot right now, I have to say. At Tech Ventures, we're involved a lot with the accelerators. In Canada, we work a lot with Creative Destruction Lab, with UTest, and also with in California, we work with Berkeley and Stanford Accelerator. And we see a lot of this new technology that are coming up and that are going to be disrupting quite a lot of the verticals. So, for example, quantum tech right now, it really is a hot spot. I think there are a lot of gravitation around quantum tech. Is it going to be the next personal computer on a chip? It could definitely be. The tech is so small and so performant. It's going to increase the time of calculation for large data sets. It's going to increase the flow of data. Is it going to be useful to have a mix of quantum and 5G, and see how is that going to turn out? There are a lot of quantum talk in cybersecurity as well, for encryption. I think this field, we're definitely keeping an eye on it. We're also trying to balance what is going to be the main key point between quantum tech and edge tech. So is it going to be a quantum that will come in first, that will replace what we have currently now as computer power, or is it going to be more toward edge tech? These are things that we want to keep an eye on. We're also recently, I've discovered myself a passion for space technology, so space/AI, especially because Creative Destruction Lab has a special stream for space, and we're seeing quite a lot of cool technology there. We also work with ISS and with Starbucks Accelerator. I'm sorry, it's not Starbucks Accelerator. It's the accelerator of Space Stream, Techstar Space Stream in the US. I think that this technology that are coming down there bring a new perspective into the way that we analyze data. Are you going to be analyzing data from the bottom ground with sensor, or are you going to use Earth observation tag to actually analyze it from the top down? So quite a lot of new technology that we're keeping an eye on. And of course, we keep an eye on healthcare, because I think now, they have me on board, so they don't have any other. It's definitely going to be a key topic of interest in healthcare. We're really moving a little bit forward past the drug discovery and drug delivery space. We've done quite a few investments into that. We want to move beyond that and see what's there into personalized medicine, at-home testing. We've seen diagnostic technology in Montreal that is highly performing. Our healthcare portfolio is doing extremely well. So we really want to see, what's going to come and disrupt the healthcare industry.
Yeah, I'm so excited after this conversation, Marina. I think I'm just going to go and like research all these companies and fields that you spoke about. And they could probably keep bugging you for another hour or so, if not
No
more.
problem.
I guess final question, Marina, to be respectful of
Yes.
your time, where can people connect, find out more about the work that you're doing?
I would suggest connect on LinkedIn if you want to chat with us, if you want to talk about Japan and how to work with high ventures, or if you want to talk about how are we going to deploy our second fund and what we're going to look for within our new investment for our second fund. Reach out on LinkedIn. I'm happy to make my email address available as well. If you want to send an email, send me a quick blurb and a quick line, and then we'll be happy to find time and chat with you.
This is amazing. Thank you so much, Marina.
Thank you very much for today. Appreciate it.